I'm Sumi Somaskanda in Washington, and this is BBC World News America. The largest prisoner swap between the West and Russia since the Cold War unfolds across 6 countries as the U.S. prepares to welcome home 3 of its citizens.
And now, their brutal ordeal is over, and they're free.
We examine what the Kremlin gets in exchange, plus the new details we're learning about the blast in Iran that killed Hamas's political leader. A very warm welcome to World News America. 24 prisoners from 6 countries are returning home in an historic, complex deal between Russia and the West. U.S. President Joe Biden posted this image of the 3 American citizens aboard a plane. Included in the exchange are Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, Marine veteran Paul Whelan, and Russian-American Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Alsu Kurmasheva. Speaking at the White House, President Biden hailed the exchange as a feat of diplomacy. The prisoner exchange took place on the runway of the airport in Ankara, the capital of Turkey. Our Russia editor Steve Rosenberg has more on how it unfolded and who was included. With us now is BBC's international editor Jeremy Bowen. Jeremy, these were very complex negotiations. Just take us through it. Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, of course. All right, Jeremy, thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. Now to what Russia gets in return. As we heard from Steve Rosenberg and just now from Jeremy, included in the deal is Vadim Krasikov. He was sentenced to life in prison by a German court in 2021 for killing a Georgian dissident who had fought against Russians in Chechnya. The Kremlin also secured the return of 7 other Russian nationals. All have known or suspected ties to Russian intelligence. That is according to U.S. officials. And joining me now is former Ambassador Alexander Vershbow, former U.S. Ambassador to Russia and former Deputy Secretary General of NATO. Ambassador, great to have you with us here on BBC News. This was, as we were just discussing, a massive undertaking stretching over several months involving several countries. Can you give us a sense of what it would have been like behind the scenes, how difficult it would have been to organize a swap like this? Okay, we have to leave the conversation there for today, but Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Well, following the release of reporter Evan Gershkovich, the Wall Street Journal said in a statement, quote, "We condemn in the strongest terms Vladimir Putin's regime in Russia, which orchestrated Evan's 491-day wrongful imprisonment based on sham accusations and a fake trial as part of an all-out assault on the free press and truth." The statement went on to say, quote, "Evan and his family have displayed unrivaled courage, resilience, and poise during this ordeal, which came to an end because of broad advocacy for his release around the world." And joining me now is Beth Noble, former Moscow bureau chief for CBS News and a professor of communications and media studies at Fordham University. Beth, great to have you on. Just remind us again how and why Evan Gershkovich was detained and how this became such a significant case so quickly. All right, Beth Noble, former Moscow bureau chief for CBS News and professor of communications and media studies at Fordham University. So great to have you on BBC News today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now to some other news. New reports are emerging about the assassination of Hamas's political leader Ismail Haniyeh on Wednesday. Mr. Haniyeh was in Tehran attending the inauguration of the new president. As a high-level ally, he was being hosted inside the presidential palace complex at a VIP guest house run by the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. In the early hours of Wednesday morning, there was an explosion in that guest house, killing Mr. Haniyeh. The New York Times, citing sources within the IRGC, reports that the explosion wasn't from a missile, but rather from a bomb that had been hidden in the guest house weeks or even months before it was detonated. Mr. Haniyeh often stayed in the guest house when visiting Tehran, and the hidden bomb was apparently very specifically targeted at his room. It is not clear how or precisely when the bomb was planted. Israel says it is not commenting on Mr. Haniyeh's death. Thousands took to the streets of Tehran Thursday to mourn Mr. Haniyeh. There were similar scenes in Beirut, where supporters of Hezbollah gathered for the funeral of Fuad Shakur, who described him as the right-hand man of that group's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, who issued a new warning. Nick Beek now reports from Beirut. And just one more item of news from the region. Israel's army has confirmed the death of Mohammed Deif, the leader of Hamas's military wing, saying he was killed in a July airstrike in Gaza. Now, delegates from the Democratic Party are choosing their nominee for president, and there's only one name on the ballot, Kamala Harris. The party is holding an online vote through Monday before its formal convention, so it can meet the deadline for getting a candidate onto the presidential ballot in certain states. Meanwhile, on Thursday, Republican vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance made a visit to the U.S.-Mexico border. Donald Trump's campaign says the border has been mismanaged and blames Kamala Harris. Let's talk about this now with Molly Ball, political correspondent at the Wall Street Journal. Molly, great to have you. Before I ask you about the politics, the news of Evan Gershkovich's release today, just tell us how the mood has been in the newsroom. I imagine it's been quite a moment. Yeah, exactly. Molly Ball, political correspondent at the Wall Street Journal. Always good to have you on BBC News. Thank you so much for joining us. And don't forget, you can follow the latest news from around the world on bbc.com/news, including our live blog with the latest updates on our top story, that historic Russian prisoner swap. Our correspondents have analysis from around the world. Thank you for watching BBC News. Stay with us.
Hello there. The heatwave we've had over recent days